Philadelphia Eagles select Jalen Reagor, wide receiver, TCU.
Kick is in. We're on the clock. Jalen Reagor, wide receiver, TCU to the Eagles.
Ooh, nice.
Get Justin Jefferson on the clock right now.
What if this draft day mistake never happened, and we somehow went back in time and gave the Philadelphia Eagles a redo? How different would the NFL be today if Philadelphia actually made the right pick? This hypothetical is what we're going to be trying to explore in today's video, and it really all starts back at the 2020 NFL draft where the Philadelphia Eagles held the 21st overall pick. The Eagles were coming off of a pretty disappointing 2019 campaign in which they did go 9-7 and first place in the NFC East, but they lost their opening wildcard game against the Seattle Seahawks 17-19 in a game where Carson Wentz got hurt very early in the ball game, forcing Josh McCown to take over, and things just did not go well. But the goal of the offseason for general manager Harry Roseman was to find some more skill position talent to surround Carson Wentz with, as their wide receiver one, Alshon Jeffrey, only played in 10 games that season and was entering his age 30 season. And the other starting receiver that year was former first-round pick Nelson Aguilar, who did disappoint in his Eagles tenure. He only played in 11 games that year due to injury before leaving in free agency to join the Las Vegas Raiders. And speedster Deshaun Jackson, who was 33 years old, also missed 13 games with a core injury, so they couldn't really look forward to the future with him either. So it was pretty clear in the offseason what the Eagles needed to address and the biggest holes on their roster. So Howie got to scouting, and lucky for him, this 2020 draft class was actually loaded with top-end wide receiver talent. There was a pair of Alabama receivers with Henry Ruggs and Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma, Brandon Ayuk out of Arizona State. But with the way the draft went, most of the top-end wide receiver talent was gone before the Eagles picked in the early 20s. And so Howie Roseman and the Philadelphia Eagles organization had their pick at Jalen Reagor or Justin Jefferson. And at the time, Roseman did admit that the Eagles were drafting for a role and kind of a fit in the offense and not necessarily talent. And he believed that the track speed and explosiveness that Reagor showed at TCU was an important element that the Eagles offense was missing in prior years. And it's easy now to look back at hindsight and see how poor of a decision this was. But at the time, Reagor versus Jefferson was very much a debate on who was the better prospect coming out. Jettas was seen as a pretty raw prospect who hadn't really flashed his separation and route running as well as you would like. And he wasn't even viewed as the best wide receiver on his own team at LSU, because also on that Tigers roster was Jamar Chase, and he was really viewed as the generational talent, not Jefferson. And I really do believe that if you told the Vikings organization how good Jefferson was going to be in the NFL, I don't know if they would have believed you. What Jefferson has been able to do since his very first start in the NFL has been nothing short of historic. Jefferson has the most receiving yards by a player through the first 5 seasons of his career with 7,432. And as a rookie, Jefferson had himself 1,400 yards. He came back as a sophomore and put together a 1,600-yard season. And then you won't believe what he did as a third-year player. He went up to 1,800 receiving yards in one season. He also holds the all-time per-game receiving yards record with 96.5, so it was very apparent early on how good Jettas was actually going to be. He's already an Offensive Player of the Year winner, a 2-time All-Pro. He's made the Pro Bowl 4 times, except for the one season that he only played in 10 games. While on the contrary, you could tell pretty early on that Jalen Reagor was not going to be that guy. Having some severe drop issues, not being able to separate or produce on a consistent basis, and also dealing with some injuries, Reagor only mustered up 64 catches for 695 yards and 3 touchdowns in his Philadelphia Eagles career. It only took Jefferson 9 starts in his NFL career to outproduce what Reagor did his entire Eagles campaign. And maybe the funniest thing of this entire situation is that during the 2022 offseason, when the Philadelphia Eagles were done with Jalen Reagor, guess who came calling wanting to trade for him? Yeah, you guessed it. It would be the Minnesota Vikings. They traded a 2023 7th rounder and a 2024 conditional 4th to make the trade happen, and it just felt like a massive troll job by the Vikings organization. And after one season in Minnesota, Reagor went to the New England Patriots and then found his way this season on the Los Angeles Chargers. He's still finding his way on NFL rosters, so I do have to respect it, but I do have a feeling that we're going to see the end of his NFL tenure fairly soon. But now to look at this through the hypothetical lens, how different would things be in the NFL currently if the Eagles did in fact take Jefferson? I think for starters, Jettas really could have helped Carson Wentz in the 2020 season when he really struggled, throwing 16 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. Wentz just did not look like the same player that year, and I feel like a big reason for that was the lack of outside talent the Eagles had. If you gave him Justin Jefferson with his route running and down the field explosiveness, I think it's entirely possible that Wentz didn't have an atrocious 2020 season and maybe even return the following season to be the starter. Now, even if Wentz did find his way on a new team after the 2020 season, I still believe the current day Eagles would look entirely different because of a trade they made just a couple of years ago on draft night. The trade I'm talking about is acquiring star wide receiver A.J. Brown from the Tennessee Titans for the 18th overall pick. The Eagles were looking for another weapon to pair with Devontae Smith, who they drafted out of Alabama, and if they had the luxury of Jefferson and Smitty on the same field, I don't think there was going to be a need to trade for A.J. Brown. Howie Roseman would have been able to use that pick for another position like maybe Trent McDuffie, who the Chiefs drafted at pick number 21, maybe even Quay Walker, an inside linebacker from Georgia. We know that Philadelphia loves taking Georgia defensive players, or even on the offensive line, they could have drafted Tyler Smith out of Tulsa to play either of the guard positions. So all in all for the Eagles, if they did make this Jefferson selection over Reagor, I think we could have seen a longer tenure of Carson Wentz. I don't think A.J. Brown would be on the team, and I believe there's a real possibility that Saquon Barkley would have never became a Philadelphia Eagle. When you break down the contract numbers, Jefferson just signed a 4-year, $140 million contract extension with 110 of it fully guaranteed. He signed that deal just this offseason, and in 2026, he's going to take up 13.25% of the salary cap. Where if you look at A.J. Brown's contract, for example, which was a 3-year, $96 million extension, he's only taking up 6.4% of the Eagles' salary cap this year and only 7.9% of it the following year. So if you take into consideration the signing bonus and the large contract that Jefferson would have needed the same offseason the Eagles got Saquon Barkley, I don't think Roseman would have been as aggressive going after a running back in free agency if they did have Jefferson's contract now on the books. I believe for the Minnesota Vikings, we could have seen a faster pivot away from Kirk Cousins. Once Jefferson joined that Minnesota team, Kirk Cousins instantly set a career high with 35 passing touchdowns. He followed it up in 2021 with his second career high with 33 passing touchdowns, and I don't think that's a coincidence that as soon as Jefferson joins his team, that magically happens. So if we're assuming that Jettas is not a part of the Vikings franchise, I don't think we see the same success that Cousins had, which could have resulted in them looking in a different direction for their starting quarterback. And for Jefferson himself, I don't think he would have shared the same success that he's seen in Minnesota if he went to Philadelphia. For as good as Jalen Hurts is, his style is not drop back passing and firing to wide receivers down the field over and over again. We've already seen it for a couple of years now with A.J. Brown and him being pretty unhappy that he does not get the ball more. Hurts is at his best when he can extend plays and rely on the run game. So I don't think Jefferson would have gotten as many targets, which would result in less catches, yards, and touchdowns. I think his situation in Minnesota, also getting Kevin O'Connell, who's one of the best offensive minds in the league as his head coach, helped a ton as well. And for what you want to say about Kirk Cousins, he kind of is a gunslinger, and he's going to give your wide receiver chances down the field with 50-50 balls. And being fortunate enough to have another very solid receiver in Adam Thielen in his prime when Jefferson joined Minnesota, along with a Pro Bowl running back in Dalvin Cook, also gave Jefferson a lot of one-on-one coverage, which I do think helped his development early in his career as well. But at the end of the day, Jettas is so good and one of the best receivers we've ever seen enter the NFL. I think he would have had some level of success no matter where he got drafted to. And although it would have been fun to see Jefferson teamed up with Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, and maybe even Saquon Barkley, I think what ended up happening was the best outcome for all parties involved. But what do you think about this hypothetical scenario? Do you think this would have changed the entire NFL landscape as we know it? And would Jefferson have been an even better player for Philly? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.